I hate pedals. I only like the sound of my amp.
Well, mate, I've got some pedals for you.
Oh my goodness. Cue all the, "This is the best sound you've ever had on the show" comments.
Or the worst.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, hello.
Right. Well, first of all,
Yeah, housekeeping.
housekeeping indeed. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us today. Want to thank everyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com and grabbed t-shirts and hats and strings and pedals and stuff. Really helps us keep going.
Yes, it's predominantly how we fund the show, so please buy stuff from thatpedalshowstore.com. Also, please subscribe.
Yeah, please do.
Click the bell, do all those things that YouTube will let you know that we're on the air.
Yep, we're shallow, we need it, we appreciate it. Thank you. Right, we're talking about pedals for people who don't like pedals. Nay, pedals for people who hate pedals, who can't stand pedals.
Shock horror, do these people exist?
Well, apparently so. And
Okay.
every now and then, they spark up in the comments going, they come to That Pedal Show, watch a video about pedals to say, "Don't really like pedals."
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And it is a noble point of view. And it's one that, let's say...
It's that thing where Ricky Gervais says it's like someone going up to a notice board that says guitar lessons and taking off the number and then calling the person going, "But I don't want any guitar lessons."
There's nothing wrong with it, right? Lest we forget that when the electric guitar began, there was electric guitars, amps, and no pedals. And the way that people got the sound was to turn the amp up and regulate from the guitar. So that's a start point.
Well, and it's that sound, to be fair, that most of us heard and went, "Oh, I'll have a bit of that."
Yeah.
So, yeah, totally. I totally get it.
But it does present a bunch of unique challenges. So in addition to all of those of you who hate pedals and will never use one, we're going to do our best briefly to show you some ways in which you can use pedals to your advantage. But more important than that, to solve a couple of key issues that occur when you use that old school approach of just cranking your amp and regulating off the guitar. Because I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Dan, that people who don't like pedals, this is a generalisation, but it is generally true.
Yeah.
One of their annoyances at pedals is that gain pedals don't sound great. They much prefer amp distortion.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the point of view. It's an entirely valid point of view, and I think rock history would mark it out as a valid point of view.
Absolutely.
So let's start there. Also, what we're not going to do is get into trying to encourage you to use flangers and phasers and weird modulated this and that, bit crushers, ring modulators.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're not going to do anything overtly effecty.
Yeah.
This is really about manipulating
that core tone, right? The thing that's the amp is doing, how we can work with that without, diminishing that at all.
Yes, yeah, without stepping all over it. So what do we see in somebody who doesn't like pedals? Usually, number one, we're not talking about modeling. We're not talking about digital effects. We're not talking about having it all in your helix. We're not talking about that. We're talking about old school, usually fairly traditional guitar, relatively cranked amp. And as such, we've got the Marshall 1987X, which is a 50 watt plexi. It has an attenuator attached to it, the Tone King Iron Man 2, the reasons for which will become apparent.
Indeed.
And we have a bunch of other stuff in the game. So as you heard in the intro, simple guitar, volume control, bit of manipulation of EQ and boost, massive range of tones.
Can we just hear that without any pedals on?
Yep.
And I just want to hear the range of tones just from the volume control.
Okay.
From that guitar.
All right, let's start there then. So those of you who do like to not use pedals and just like the amp, have the amp a bit crunchy. We've said it kind of crunchy.
Yeah.
I'll pick up a humbucker guitar in a sec to show you the extent of that crunchy. But we've got the amp set to the point where the Strat will be fairly clean, the P90 guitar will be somewhere in the middle, and the humbucker guitar will be quite crunchy.
Yeah.
We'll do that. We've got the channels jumped in the Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
The high treble channel is on about 9 o'clock thereabouts, and the normal channel is about 11 o'clock.
Boy, is that all it is?
Yeah, well, it just gets more overdriven after that, which is all part and parcel of the discussion.
Yep. Okay.
Anyway, here we are. We're attenuated, I think, to minus 7 dB.
So what would that be down to? About 15 watts?
Minus 10 dB, actually.
Minus 10 dB. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll change that throughout the show. Anyway, enough yakking. Here we go.
Let's boogie. So I'll do the same thing on this, right? I really had to use the tone control. It's the first time I think I've ever done that. It's going, oh, red, a bit bitey. Fascinating.
So with that simple apologies for all the G chords, but hopefully it gives a grounds for comparison. Hopefully that introduces the first set of issues we come to if you set your amp and you only use your amp for a bit of distortion in that way. The first one?
Well, the first one is the different levels coming out of the guitars reacts completely differently with the gain structure of the amplifier. Yeah. So not only do we have, these different levels of limiting and saturation with the amplifier, but, tonally, obviously you hear the massive differences between the guitar, but those inconsistencies are really dramatic.
Massive, yeah. And the effectiveness of your controls, depending on how long your cable run is, all of that stuff is really, really important at this point. The Strat, for example, going from full volume, Strat players will be well aware of this. Traditional Strat players will be well aware of this. Going from full volume to just turning that volume off, all the tone goes away.
Yep.
So the first thing we're going to touch on, and this is not necessarily part of the discussion, is one way you can stop that with a Strat in particular. So check this out, right? There is a pedal there. It doesn't really matter what pedal it is. It genuinely doesn't matter what pedal it is. When it's off, it's true bypass. When you turn it on, it has a buffer in the circuit. There's no effect dialed in whatsoever. All I'm doing is turning the pedal on and off. So here we go. I'm going to turn the Strat up full. Then I'm going to turn it down to about sort of 7 or 8, where most of us live, for that slightly rolled off sound. You'll hear how much treble goes away. Super simple discussion.
Yep.
There's no overt preamp that we know of in that pedal. I can tell you boosters that will do it. I can tell you many, many pedals that will do it.
Many pedals.
So you're not even using the pedal for its sound. All you're doing is using its buffer to keep the guitar bright when you turn the guitar down.
Yep. So one option might be to have an always on buffer at the end of the signal chain, and that keeps everything consistent. Great way to do it.
Personally, I like having the option.
Yep.
Because I like it in a verse, for example, if either she or I am singing.
Am I she?
For those of us who have done gigs with female singers who maybe aren't that loud, or male singers who aren't that loud for that matter, you need the guitar to sit right back. It can be really useful to have some of that treble fall off.
Yeah, totally.
So having the option there is good. So that's super simple, no pedal sound at all, just using the buffer to keep a guitar bright when you turn the volume down. However, what are we normally wanting to do with our amps?
Get louder. Right, and this is the big problem with this sort of setup, because the whole idea with running your amp like this is that it's limiting, right? We've reached the edge of the amplifier's potential, right? So here's ground, and here's our voltage, and here's our lovely guitar signal coming in. And now we've amplified that guitar signal to a point where it's got nowhere else to go. And that is what's giving us that lovely sound. So, the power amp's got nowhere to go. The speakers have got nowhere to go. It's like everything is at that point where it's like, I can push more into this. All that's going to give me is more limiting, more saturation, but no more volume.
It's such a common question we get asked all the time. I use the gain in my amp. I want to get louder for solos. How do I do it? Now, some amps have switchable master volumes. Yep. The sort of the logical thing to say is, well, if I hit the front of my amp with the boost pedal, it's going to get louder, but it doesn't. It just gets more distorted.
It's more distorted.
Let's demonstrate that for a second. So the Majestic Overdrive on the board there is not a boost pedal, it's an overdrive pedal, but we'll set it up as a boost so that it's not doing a massive overdrive sound. Dan will hammer away, full chat into the Marshall. I'll turn the Majestic on, and you'll hear that it's quite hard to get it much louder. Bit louder, lovely and more distorted, boosting the front end, but not a lot louder, probably not loud enough for a solo boost. Just going to prove how much louder it does get. Dan, if you just turn the guitar down a bit and I'll turn it on and off.
So that's a lot of level there.
Yeah, you notice that when the guitar's turned down, the pedal makes a massive volume difference, and when the guitar's turned up, it doesn't. Why is that?
Well, because we're reducing the amount of signal that eventually ends up in the amplifier. So what we then have is we've got, you know, small amount of signal going into the amplifier when it's off, and then that small amount of signal is then amplified by the pedal.
Yeah.
And then that reaches that point where the, you know, amp can't take it anymore, and then it doesn't really matter what's going into it. We're at the edge of our potential.
There's nowhere for it to go.
Yeah.
The analogy is the glass. You stick it on a table, you fill it with water, more and more and more and more, it starts overflowing over the top. No matter how much you put in, you cannot get any more water in that glass.
So what is the answer?
Okay, it does, the example with the Majestic there does rather neatly explain why so many people who love the gain sound of their amps don't like pedals.
Yes.
Because you step on it and you're like,
Where's my amp gone?
where's my amp gone? Yeah, and actually all I'm getting is mush.
Yeah.
Pedals just don't work for me. So what can you do? And after the example of the buffer, the first pedal we're going to suggest that people who hate pedals ought to look at is some combination of boost and EQ shaping. And that is why the MXR 10-band EQ is on the board.
Yep. So what we're specifically going to do is we're not going to distort that signal from the pedal. All we're going to do is control the level and then look at the frequencies that we can push into the amplifier. Now, I love treble boosters and that, you know, the way they work with my AC30 and the matchless. They do something really special. We can do a very similar thing with the EQ. Treble boosters, they're like a single transistor fuzz, right? So there's an amount of breakup in that. We're not going to do any additional breakup with this.
No affected sound, no clipping diodes, no kind of step change in tone, just EQ.
Yeah. And so what will happen is as we push certain frequencies into the amplifier, those frequencies will limit first, right? It's really, really fascinating. And the great thing about using an EQ like this is that you can tailor it to the amp that you're using.
Yeah.
Some amplifiers, they're going to love a bit more push in the bottom end. Some, you know, all mids. Some just a bit of top end sizzle. But yeah.
And we'll have a look at that. We'll talk about some of the frequencies that maybe that could be useful if you want to try this. So I'm going to use the Strat because it's set in a way currently that's quite friendly to Strats.
Yep.
And it's essentially the weakest guitar we have here.
Okay.
So Dan, if you wouldn't mind just doing the do.
Mm-hmm. So all that extra gain and sizzle and limiting is all coming from not the pedal, but the way those extra frequencies being boosted into the amplifier, and that amplifier is reacting. So cool.
Dan, pick up something with some grunt, can you?
I can.
So I'm going to do some more extreme things with the EQ now. I'm going to push the gain all the way up. I'm going to manipulate some of the EQ more than maybe you would, but it will give you an idea of the possibilities.
Yeah, if you go through the sliders individually,
Yeah.
just listen for the frequencies that work into this amplifier set like this.
Yeah. Before I do that, I'm just going to... So this particular EQ has both gain and master volume.
Right.
So I'll just show you how that works. Case closed, my lad.
Yep.
Does not sound like a pedal.
Not at all.
Just sounds like more amp.
Yep.
And so what I did there on the frequencies, we'll just have a quick look at the individual frequencies in a sec, but a good rule of thumb, if you're playing a humbucker type guitar, or any guitar for that matter, into an amp which is cranked, what will happen is all of those frequencies are overdriving considerably.
Mm-hmm.
You boost that, what happens is you can really often get mud.
Yeah.
So what I did
You
is...
boost all those frequencies together, we lift them all up together, and then everything's sort of...
And that, in the context of that discussion about the amp having nowhere to go, and when you boost it, you don't really get a lift for solos.
Yeah.
In the context of that discussion, we've boosted significantly here, but we've done it in a non-equal way, frequency-wise. So the frequencies that we know that cause mud are the low frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really anything from... Typical mud frequencies are kind of 500 to 200.
Oh, okay.
Maybe even a bit lower than that. So mud is kind of boxy, just indistinct mess.
Yeah.
And if you carve some of that out, which you can see we've done on the EQ pedal there, I'll just turn it on so you can see the eye blinding LEDs. You can see the basic shape. Now, once you get down, some of these lower ones is like 30 hertz down there.
Yeah.
We'll demonstrate that in a minute. But once you get down to 180 hertz is kind of chest.
Okay.
That's where you feel that. That too can be quite muddying, but really it's that sort of 2 to 5, 600.
Right.
If you carve that out, there's a fly in here, Daniel. If you carve that out, you'll get rid of that mud. Similarly, we've boosted at 1, 2, 4, 8K a little bit. You can see that little curve there. That gives you bite, crunch,
Yeah.
sizzle, all those things you want from that and that.
So when this is going and you've got nowhere else to go and it's your time for a solo and you need to pop out in the mix, it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. So let's have a quick look at those frequencies then. I'll put the gain back to normal. We will put all the sliders back to normal and I'll just push them up one by one so you can really hear what they're doing.
fantastic.
The ones that should have that really stood out to you. So certainly down the bottom, 31, 60 hertz down there. You're not hearing that as much as feeling it. That's resonance, really, and that will cause a lot of mud. That's the kind of thing that when you mic up a guitar amp, you put the 50 hertz low cut filter on, and it'll just tail it off from there. When it gets interesting, though, you'll notice I did a few settings which really pushed that muddy stuff we were talking about earlier, and then pulled it out. 500 hertz was the one that Dan was like, made a nose.
Yes.
500 hertz is interesting because somewhere between 500 and 700 is where the Tube Screamer does its nose.
Yep.
1K was interesting because 1K is where the Klon does its nose. And then when you said, oh, that's nice, 12K,
yeah,
that's air.
That was amazing,
That's
actually.
present. So if you use something like a traditional Helios type console, which is famous old console, the way they tend to work is a boost at 80 hertz and a boost at kind of 10 to 12.
Wow.
And it's just this lovely thing that seems to work with electric guitars so brilliantly well. I think we've laboured the point enough on the EQ to say that. So neither Dan nor I use EQ pedals because we don't tend to use our amps and guitars in this way.
Sure.
But if you use your amp and guitar in this way, and you find that trying to boost it to make it louder is problematic.
Yeah, absolutely fundamental.
Doesn't sound like a pedal, doesn't make your amp sound smaller and squashy and compressed,
Yeah.
just enables you to tailor it, poke out for solos, consequently sit back for other stuff if that's what you want to do, and that's what we're probably going to talk about very soon.
Indeed. Maybe even now.
In a minute. Of course, the other place that you can put a boost is in the effects loop of the amp. So one issue with if you're hitting the front of the amp really hard and you boost it, all of those things we just talked about, you can put a boost in the effects loop of the amp.
Indeed. It all comes down to the sort of amp you're using. Like, for example, if you've got, like a higher gain amplifier and you're using the master volume, if the master volume is in, here you go, post-phase inverter, pre-phase inverter, master volume, depending on where that's set, you've got some headroom left in the amp, right? In that case, then yes, you can put a boost in the loop. In this situation, though, where there is no master volume, we simply have volumes and the amp is just going, I'm already there, then it's the same sort of situation as sticking the pedal in the front. We're just limiting more.
There may or may not be somewhere for the amp to go, and there's two discussions here. So what we've got in the loop of the Marshall is the JHS Colour Box, which is the straight Neve type pedal preamp strip. I think it's a Neve type one. If it isn't, doesn't really matter. It's a console type preamp. I've got it set on the lowest gain setting, so it's not adding a great deal of overdrive.
Yeah, it's pretty open.
I'll just tip it up so you can, I don't know if Catherine can get in on the knobs there. In any case, if you can't see it, the volume is, well, the master's all the way around to about 2-3 o'clock, and the pre-volume is down. Just going to switch it in and out a sec so you can hear what it's doing. What you heard there is it was driving so much it crapped out completely. In some amps, if they've got the headroom and you put the boost in the loop, it can indeed lift.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have the headroom, it's not going to lift. It's just going to do more or less what it's doing in the front of the amp and just make the whole thing cave in.
Yep.
Now, and that was a huge amount of boost too. The other situation there is because we've got the attenuator plugged in and it's set to minus 10 dB, it is limiting the amp. If we lessen the limit on the amp a little bit, Dan's got a foot switch on the floor here which takes that attenuator. It's the Tone King Iron Man 2 100 watt version, and it will take it. I just need my glasses a sec. it will take it from
The limit?
-7. It'll take it from -7 to -4 dB. One more time. And then in a minute we'll do...
So glad you got that.
And then we'll do a more radical change. Anyway, regardless of boosts and loops and all of that, here is the amp at -7 and -4. This will be between -10 and -4. I'm going to switch the boost on at -10 dB attenuation. Noticing much difference?
Just a bit gainier.
Just a bit gainier. We're now going to switch the boost and the loop on at -4 dB attenuation.
Certainly much more.
Much more?
Yep.
It's going to clip the preamps. We'll do it at one level less.
Here come the pain.
0 dB attenuation, Dan.
Okay. Wow.
Get ready. It's probably going to clip the mics, but...
The Iron Man is very impressive.
There's a couple of really interesting...
I said the Iron Man was very impressive.
I am Iron Man. There was a couple of really interesting points there, just to finish off this whole thing about boosts. And apologies if you've turned off already because it's too in-depth, but it really is everything you need to know about gain staging, compression, limiting, and what makes a cool guitar sound.
But from this side.
Yeah, from the important side, right?
Yeah.
It's another reason why me and him don't really like attenuators very much. Once you tell the amp, once you're limiting the amp into where it can go, and we're doing that with the attenuator, anything you do after that just gets squashier.
Yep.
Right? So the more you release the amp from that limiting and the more you give the amp headroom again,
the more it has somewhere to go.
Your external devices give you somewhere to go.
Yep.
Now, it introduces a super interesting concept vis-a-vis the attenuator at this point. Because the way I don't know whether it's just guitar players or it's all humans, what we want to do to our amp is start here or like this and add more.
Yes.
And as we've kind of proved...
Because more is more, Mick.
More is more. For those of you who've never seen Yngwie Malmsteen say those words...
This isn't more.
Please do.
More is
Please
more.
do. More is more. Can I honk Yngwie? Yes, I can.
Jealous of that honk. That's great.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, but let's do it again. So the problem of a cranked amp is adding more doesn't really get you anywhere. Just get you squashy, compressed. You might love that, might be the sound you want. But if what we're talking about is, boost for solos, more clarity, all the things that you would normally want with more, it just doesn't work that way. So let's turn it on its head. We've got two ways of doing this. And say, the reason you don't love pedals is because you love your amp.
Yes.
So let's let the amp do what it's supposed to do. And instead of going, I'm going to start here and add more, why don't we go, I'm going to start at more and take away.
Very good.
It's not that hard.
Yep. Mark?
It's not that hard, Mark. Come on, spell AC/DC.
I love ADDC.
Anything ADDC is good.
I played my kids that on holiday. They were wetting themselves. So funny. Anyway, we digress.
And all it is just, it's a thin line, isn't it?
So thin.
Between stupid and clever. No, you just turn it on its head and you start with where you want to be and then you take away. And there's three ways you can do that. The reverse of everything we've just done. One, Underdrive, we'll demonstrate that in a sec. But seeing as we're talking about the attenuator, we've essentially just demonstrated it.
Yep. We're switching different levels of attenuation.
This attenuator has a foot switch.
Yeah.
So you can go from loud and clean and, well, not clean, loud, headroomy, dynamic, and switch it right down. Again, let's turn that on its head and say, what I might want is my squashy, heavy overdrive sound at the higher attenuation level.
Right.
And the problem I've got with that is my Strat doesn't stay clean.
Sure.
So what I want is to switch the amp up to full with the Strat.
Have a cleaner tone at a louder volume.
Well, you've got more headroom, therefore you've got the ability for it.
Yeah.
Dan, could you pick up a less fire-breathing guitar? So I'll just do the final bit on the attenuator. Yeah, here we go.
Just sorry, it sounds so good.
So you're full up on the guitar?
Full up.
I'm going to turn the amp up. I'm going to get it even more overdriving.
Okay.
And just investigate what your volume and controls do.
Fantastic.
There's a lot there.
Yep.
Let's we had this set up to quite a nice place before, so we'll introduce this now, the boost.
Killer.
Pretty good. Plenty of kind of balls out, but not a huge. I mean, with the graphic off, quite a bit of dynamic range off the guitar, but you also lose a huge amount of volume.
Indeed.
So let us de-attenuate the amp from -10 to -4 and just see what the experience of that is like.
Okay.
Can you try and use the volume and tone controls?
I can try.
What's the playing experience of that then?
Well, it's louder, it's more fun, but there's a lot more dynamic once that's lifted.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very, very cool sound.
Yeah. So for those of us, for all of us who love the sound of a cranked amp, you know, fire breathing is just a really special thing. But it does give you this dynamic problem, especially if you're limiting the amp massively by having it dimed and or using an attenuator.
Yeah.
Attenuators attenuate, right? So what do? They remove all the dynamic range. So your full-on sound is great, but back from there is more difficult. And then we're into this infinitely variable shade of grey, which goes from clean and spiky and not very nice at all, to fire breathing, falling over, wonderful. And where you sit on that scale is really down to how you stage that gain.
Totally.
So let's say then we really like the sound of our big clean, well, not clean, but headroomy.
Yeah.
Notice how I've made that mistake a few times. I use the word clean when I mean high headroom, and that's because it manifests itself as clarity.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't it?
Yeah,
High headroom.
Yep, totally.
Tell us about Underdrive, Dan.
Okay, so the idea with an Underdrive is if all I did was reduce the volume, so I'm going to use the EQ pedal now to just reduce the volume.
Yep.
All right, so just so all flat. So I'm not actually getting any quieter by reducing the amount of signal that's going into the amplifier. It's simply clipping less.
Can you prove that? Just give us a thwack. Very, very little difference in the dB meter.
Yeah, and look how much I'm attenuating with that, like the volume.
Minus 12 dB.
Yeah.
Well,
minus 12 something.
might be minus 12, might be minus 12 dB.
Why don't you make it minus 10 and make that
G.I. Joe's out.
So the issue with turning down the volume is I'm not getting my drop. I just get less gain. So the idea with an underdrive is that we're going to introduce some pedal gain so that it interacts with the amplifier. I'm going to reduce the volume. So it's like if I've got the amplifier, it's cooking, it's great, but it's sort of, you know, come the verse, you know, I just want to be able to duck under it a bit. So what I'm going to do with the Majestic by J Rocket to reduce the input going into the amplifier, nice catch, but also add a bit of pedal gain. And you need to be, a couple of things to consider with an underdrive pedal. It's got to be, some will work better than others. What's important is EQ in it.
Yeah.
You want to be able to, you know, match EQ. Having a bass and treble in there is really handy. So
yeah,
anyway,
you want to maintain your gain and you want to maintain the EQ, but you want to drop the volume. And you may want to change the EQ. So I'm going to turn the amp up to full.
Yep.
You know, we're on the minimum attenuation. Well, actually, it's on -4 dB, I think.
Okay.
So we've got headroom, yeah?
Yep.
I did turn the gain down a little bit as well. You could even turn it down a bit more, mate, just to make the difference more obvious. Bit less treble, bit more bass. I had a quick glance at the dB meter there. We're going from 95 to 102, 103, something like that.
right.
Huge drop.
Massive.
Yeah, and the practical application of that is, well, you know, right? The introduction is huge to the song, or the solo needs to be loud, and then you still need a quite fat, distorted guitar sound over the singing.
Yep.
But it needs to be under the singing.
Yeah.
So you need to underdrive it.
Very good.
And again, it is that just turning it on its head. It's saying not what do I add to make more, what do I take away to make less. It's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just a different way of doing it.
So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch between the MXR and the underdrive so you can hear the difference between just turning the input down and then kicking on an underdrive.
Okay, I've gone back to a slightly more attenuated sound just to get the overdrive working a bit more. Nevertheless,
Indeed.
this is what you'll get. Yeah, both of those sounds could be usable.
Totally.
But if you want to retain that fatter rhythm sound, just turning it down, same as just turning it down from the guitar.
Yeah, it's the same concept.
Yeah, and every shade in between.
Yep.
So you may have applications for both of those things, but it's the theory of taking away, not adding.
Indeed. Okay, so underdrive, EQ. The last thing we're going to have a look at, and this is sort of a bit out of left field, but it's so interesting. We've talked a lot about slapback and tight delay sounds and things like that. And one of the things that we've both, by using the Chase Bliss CXM 1978, we found these small hall sounds that in context of rock guitar just sound incredible.
Yeah, room reverbs, especially for me.
Yeah, small rooms, right? So we thought, okay, let's try this out. And it works brilliantly. What we're going to do, take a really simple reverb. What we need is, we need to be able to control the decay, which is the amount of time the reverb decays, the length. We need to be able to control the tone of the reverb. We need to be able to control the level of the reverb. And lo and behold, the JHS Series 3 has those three knobs on top, okay? So what I'm going to do...
This is as effecty as it's ever going to get in this video.
But the idea is we're not changing the chord tone of the amplifier. We just want to add a little bit of space around the note, okay? So I'm going to leave the decay all the way down. I'm going to leave the tone all the way down, as dark as possible. And then I'm just going to start adding the level to the level up. So if you play, and I'll start turning this level up. It is so cool. It is so cool. And we're not changing the fundamental sound of the amplifier. We're just adding a tiny little bit of space. Okay, it's still working with what's going on to the amp.
Yeah. It is adding a bit of noise, actually, because the amp's cranked.
Because the amp's crank. And
the amp's got increasingly cranked through the video, actually.
Indeed. But because we're adding that, adding a buffer and all that sort of stuff, we're going to get increased noise levels. And, this is just an example of a really simple reverb pedal. But the other thing is there's a bit of pre-delay on this, and I'll just turn the pre-delay on.
Yeah. Get it, at some point, I'm going to just change to the Strat for a second.
Okay.
Just so that it's a little bit cleaner. In fact, let's go back to the top of the video.
Very good.
Let's play this. All the people going, no, keep the Les Paul. Yeah, let's do this. Simple guitar, cranked amp, simple reverb. So I just want to hear a bit more of it.
Yeah.
Let's just see. Interesting.
So what's going on there?
The reason I turned it up a bit, A, was to hear a bit more reverb, which is always nice. B, when you have the underdrive before the reverb, what are you doing?
So we're reducing that level massively, and we're changing the gain stage going into the reverb pedal. So the reverb pedal sounds completely different. So to do this properly, we need to have the underdrive at the end of the chain.
After the reverb.
After the reverb.
Which is not normally the way you do it.
No.
Let's finish on that.
Okay.
No settings have been harmed in the recabling of this pedal board.
Indeed. I think without going into delay and effecty stuff, I think it's such a fantastic way just to add a little bit of something.
Yeah.
You know, it's still, we're still working with the amp, right?
Especially in amps that don't have reverb.
Yeah, it's great. And we're setting it up differently because we're going in the front of a dirty amplifier.
Yeah, yeah.
So that tight room thing, really short decay, warm, and you'd be surprised how little level you need to make that work.
Yeah. Equally, put it in the loop if that's more to your preference.
Yeah.
But chiefly important in this case, as we proved, that if you're using the underdrive method, if you change the signal going into the front of the reverb, the effect of the reverb is vastly different. And of course, that's one of the main reasons you would put the reverb in the loop.
Sure. So there we go.
Well, pedals for people who hate guitar pedals. What did we go through? We went through a boost and a shaper.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about attenuators.
Yep.
We talked about an underdrive. So all ways in which you can take that glorious sound of your guitar and amp combination and not change it too much, but make it more versatile to the things you might need to do. Get louder and quieter, gainier and less gainy, and all that.
Yep.
Honourable mentions, Daniel?
Honourable mentions. Well, tuner.
Yeah.
You have to have an honourable mention for a tuner.
The tuner is the pedal for all people.
Indeed. Indeed.
Whether you like pedals.
No one is immune.
We should probably mention a looper as well. A looper is something that's not overtly effecty, but is a really good fun thing to play with, like a phrase looper.
Yep.
We've done other videos on that. So what else will we say? Compressor maybe, but that is its whole other discussion on gain structure and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and because the amp is limiting so much, you know.
And they are fundamental tone changes of compressors.
Indeed.
And indeed all the other pedals there. But hopefully what we got here was nothing too effecty, just manipulation of the core, relationship between this and that. Happy days. Happy
days indeed. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And thanks for everyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com and grabbed some merch. It really helps us out. It helps the show keep going.
Indeed.
Massive thank you to our preferred retailers in the UK and Europe is
Anderton's Music of Guildford in Surrey.
And our dear friends in Australia.
Pedal Empire of Brisbane in Queensland.
And there are some links in the description below.
Indeed there are. If you click them down and go to sweetwater.com and buy anything, Dan and I get kickback off that, and it also helps us fund making this show.
Fabulous. Massive thank you to our patrons on Patreon as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We do a live VCQ every Monday, 5 p.m. whatever's going on in England, whether it's daylight savings or whatever.
5 p.m. English time.
5 p.m. English time. British time. So yeah, join us then, and we hope to see you for VCQ.
Okay.
Brilliant. Have a great day. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.